Okay, let's jump right into it. Today, we're doing an explainer on a really fascinating and definitely outside-the-box alternative theoretical physics framework. It's proposed by R. and Michael Meyer, and it's called the NKE theory of everything. Now, if you're wondering what NKE stands for, it's German for Nix Krusta Etwas, which translates to nothing crusts something. Basically, we're going to map out how this author attempts to trace the absolute origins of reality. And here's the kicker. He does it not by using incredibly dense, complex mathematics, but by starting from literal absolute nothingness.
To keep all this highly abstract material grounded, we're going to play detective a bit today. We'll be following a clear path. First, the unsolved mysteries of physics. Second, what actually is a theory of everything. Third, the boostful process explained. Fourth, building a universe through infinite emergence. And finally, number 5, an entirely new worldview. Let's get to it.
Section 1. The Unsolved Mysteries of Physics.
So the author points out something you've probably noticed yourself. From a very young age, we're taught totally disconnected stories about how the universe works. I mean, cosmology and geology, they're taught as if they don't share a fundamental root at all. The text argues that modern physics kind of threw in the towel on finding a truly unifying theory almost a century ago. And instead of fostering a genuine desire to understand reality, the mandate in science education basically became, well, shut up, accept, and memorize.
And honestly, this perfectly highlights the core problem the author is tackling here. Traditional education feeds us these isolated scientific fields that are just full of unresolved paradoxes. The NKE alternative, on the other hand, proposes a radical shift. It argues we desperately need a single, logical, continuous thread, a baseline from which all physical reality just naturally emerges, completely free of contradictions.
Section 2. What is a theory of everything?
Right. Before we can even look at the proposed solution, we have to understand why this is so hard. Why did traditional physics abandon the search? Well, the framework argues that scientists hit two massive brick walls. First up, the ultimate paradox of causation. You know the one. Who created the creator? If something started the universe, well, what started that thing? Second, they ran straight into Gödel's incompleteness theorem. In simple terms, this states that you literally cannot mathematically prove every truth from strictly within a given system. You will always, eventually, hit a wall.
So how do we cross this seemingly impossible intellectual swamp? The author actually uses a really cool metaphor here, the swamp model. Imagine the unknown as this vast, murky swamp. Instead of trying to drain the whole thing, the idea is to set down absolute certainties, undeniable facts, like the fact that we exist at all, and place flags on them. Once we have those secure flags, we use raw logic to build sturdy logical bridges between them. It lets us safely navigate the unknown without sinking into some endless philosophical loop.
Now, the really crucial point here is how the NKE framework totally sidesteps Gödel's theorem. It does this by adopting something the text calls a temporary absolute truth, or Tao for short. Basically, this is a working truth that we agree remains completely valid and operational right up until new evidence actively disproves it. It's incredibly pragmatic. It allows us to confidently investigate the universe step by step, instead of sitting around waiting for some impossible state of mathematical perfection.
Moving on to Section 3. The boostful process explained.
Okay, with our detective guidelines firmly in place, it's time to look under the hood at the core engine of the NKE model. The author asserts that the universe absolutely could not have been built top-down with pre-programmed external laws, so it has to start with the smallest imaginable process. This is called the boostful process. It's described as a tautological mechanism that continuously separates absolute nothing via an infinitely thin virtual crust in order to create something. Keep in mind, nothing is actually being added from the outside. The nothing itself is just being fundamentally separated.
Now, to generate an entire universe totally from scratch, this baseline separation process has to operate with 4 inescapable traits. It absolutely must be binary, infinitely fast, infinitely fine, and omnipresent across reality. So by constantly dividing nothingness at an infinite speed everywhere at once, it generates a limitless, vibrating network that sits entirely underneath all the physics we can currently measure.
Section 4. Universe through infinite emergence.
So we get the basic engine, but how in the world do we get from a vibrating field of nothingness to things like planets, stars, and, us?
The model suggests a purely bottom-up emergence. Because these separations are infinitely fast and infinitely fine, every once in a while they fail to perfectly reunite back into nothingness. This is a symmetry break. And this tiny failure to seamlessly merge leaves behind a persistent difference in the field. Over massive, unimaginable spans of time, these tiny differences aggregate, build up, and eventually stabilize into actual physical reality.
What's really fascinating about this concept is how the author describes it, using the metaphor of a self-correcting frequency orchestra. The chaotic vibrations created by those tiny symmetry breaks, they don't actually stay chaotic. According to the text, they naturally harmonize and self-stabilize into really robust, cyclical patterns. And it's these stable patterns that eventually form the 95 stable chemical elements we know today. And they do it entirely on their own with zero external coordinator.
Now, embracing this requires a massive paradigm shift away from traditional physics because it radically remaps the standard forces. Take gravity, for example. Instead of some mysterious pulling force, NKE proposes that gravity is simply a drag effect caused by structural aggregation within that underlying network. Temperature? That's seen just as undirected vibrations. And matter itself is just composed of those orphaned, self-stabilized resonances we were just talking about. It's a completely different way of looking at reality.
Furthermore, the author makes a pretty huge claim here. You know our most famous cosmic numbers? The speed of light, the gravitational constant, the fine structure constant. Standard physics often treats these as lucky, random parameters that just happen to support a universe. But the NKE model argues they are mandatory consequences of the bus phone network limiting its own infinite speed through self-interference. They aren't arbitrary at all. They naturally just bubble up from the baseline mechanics of the network itself.
Which brings us to Section 5, a new worldview. So if we choose to entertain this highly complex, bottom-up emergent structure, it completely challenges how we perceive our place in the cosmos. Now, the author is totally upfront. They explicitly acknowledge that version 1.1 of this theory is incomplete. It's unpolished. But instead of hiding it away until it's mathematically flawless, they're putting it out there as a cognitive challenge. It's an open invitation for mathematicians, physicists, and philosophers to jump in and collaboratively test, critique, and refine these ideas. It's a true exercise in critical thinking, actively pushing back against that shut up and memorize mentality.
Because, as the author profoundly points out, even if we eventually manage to perfectly map out the underlying mechanics of the universe, it doesn't hand us our life's purpose on a silver platter, does it? It merely gives us the framework, the canvas of reality. It leaves us staring at the ultimate question: what do I actually do with the life I have? It empowers us to go out and build that meaning completely for ourselves. And honestly, I think that is a brilliant, highly provocative place to wrap up our explainer for today. So what will you build with the life you have?